This Week in Startups is brought to you by HostGator, your one-stop shop to getting your business online. Your domain name, your website design, even your marketing, they've got you covered. Have questions? Their team is there 24/7 via chat, phone, and email to help you. Start today with 30% off with coupon code TWiST. And Walker Corporate Law, a boutique law firm specializing in the representation of entrepreneurs. Visit them at walkercorporatelaw.com.
One of the people I've wanted to interview for This Week in Startups for a really long time is Daniel Ek, the founder of Spotify. We all use Spotify. We all love Spotify. They've got over 20 million paying members now. That's starting to get into, HBO territory, Netflix territory. It's a tremendous company. But it was one of those companies that's extremely hard to get to scale. And Daniel is a tremendous founder, but he doesn't do a lot of interviews. He's pretty quiet. And we had a connection during this talk, which took place at the Stockholm Tech Fest that Tyler Crowley, Insights from Tyler, hosts every year. And I was really privileged to be able to sit down with him. And listen, Spotify, every year, somebody tells me Spotify is going to die and they're going to be killed by YouTube's music product, Google's music product, Jay-Z's music product, Tidal, Apple's going to release this Beats product that's going to kill Spotify, and Spotify keeps growing. There's something magical about this startup, and in this exclusive interview with Daniel, we really get to the heart of his entrepreneurial story and how they've made Spotify into a juggernaut. You're going to love this episode. Stick with us.
That's what it's all about, man. They said money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah, money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah, we ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
I'm really excited about our next guest because I've been trying to sit down with you for an interview. You're busy. You're busy building.
I've got small kids.
You have kids now. Congratulations.
Yeah, but now you're in Stockholm. Then it's much easier.
It's easier because you live around here.
Yes.
And you started Spotify here.
Yeah.
What year did you start?
So we started in 2006, but we launched the service end of 2008.
Oh, just right during the financial crisis.
Yes. So that's when we thought this is
perfect
timing.
What we need.
Yeah.
If you start at the bottom, it makes it that much easier to get to the top.
Actually, there's a lot of successful businesses that were sort of the same. Like you have the Google.
Absolutely.
So on.
Well, I mean, you start at the bottom as an entrepreneur in terms of the market.
Right.
There's not as much competition for talent.
Right.
Or office space.
Right.
It's just everything gets easier.
Yeah.
Except for your valuation.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough. But you're right. I mean, right now, I think in many parts of the world, like the just competition for talent is insane. We see in the Bay Area, we see salary increases with more than 100%, like year over year.
100% year over year.
Yeah, and just so we're clearly at like unheard levels in terms of just equity participation and so on for employees.
I mean, you have companies like Google, which are paying people double or triple the market rate of a salary.
Right.
And they don't actually have jobs there. They just kind of go and they don't actually have like a lot of goals, let's say.
Yeah.
Or a lot of work to do.
Yeah, that's not Spotify, by the way.
So if you come to Spotify, you don't just eat the free food?
No, we don't even have free food. So
has that not hit here yet in Sweden?
No, because you get like taxed 3 times as much what the meal actually costs.
Because they count it as compensation.
Yes. So if you're supposed to offset that benefit that the employee is getting, like the fees ends up getting crazy.
Yes. The socialism thing is crazy.
Yes. So what I do actually when we have politicians over, because we're allowed to give them like really we're allowed to give them sandwiches that have been in the fridge for a couple of days. So I
like a cheese sandwich is okay.
Yeah, but preferably that it's been in the fridge. Like the longer it's been in the fridge, if it was actually fresh made, then probably not.
Probably not. But if it's packaged for a couple of days,
then it works. So usually I invite politicians over to the office and kind of say, hey, do you want to go for lunch? And then I have them pick up in the fridge this like greasy looking sandwich, and they're like, ooh, this doesn't look good.
But it's not one of those like tasty schmorborg like brown bread sandwiches. sandwiches. Or
No,
anything like that.
no.
Nothing tasty.
No, they're definitely not tasty.
When you decided to start a music company, did all of your friends tell you how insane that was and try to stop you? Because we have a lot of friends in common.
Yep.
And all of our friends have lost years of their lives, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, trying to do music. In fact, Nicholas, who's going to be on later for Centrum, he had Kazaa, Napster, Sean Fanning, Sean Parker. I mean, the number of entrepreneurs who have absolutely failed brutally and been sued for billions of dollars is a long list.
Yeah.
When you started this, did they tell you you're an idiot?
Yeah.
But you did it anyway.
Yeah.
So what was it that you knew at that time that led you to believe you could actually pull this off?
Nothing. That's the thing.
So it was completely, you were just completely naive or stupid?
Well, I guess a bit of both.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, it's you know, when you're 22, 23 and have had like a successful company before, you kind of feel like you're on top of the world. You feel
invincible.
Like this, yeah, you know, this.
What was your first company?
So my first company was when I was 14. It was just some web design company. It was like, when I think back of it today, it's really just fantastic because you had at the time, like, this is 97, so it was in the movement where everyone needed a homepage, and you had this really big, expensive consultancy companies who were charging like $50,000 to make the simplest web page. I didn't care that much about any of that. And then one day someone came to me and said, hey, can you build a web page? And I'm like, no, I'm not really interested. And then the person said, well, I'll pay you. And I was 14 at the time. So I said, well, I'm not really interested. Well, name your price. And I just said, well, $5,000, just something that sounded absurd. And the person
just for the record, $5,000 for a 14-year-old is absurd.
Yeah. So I just said that number, and the person said, fine. So I'm like, shit, I get to learn how to create web pages. And,
right. Can't be that hard.
Yeah, that was my attitude. And next time, you know, someone came on and say, hey, can you create another web page because you did this first one really well? And I said, no, I don't really want to do it. And name your price. I said $10,000. And then all of a sudden I got $10,000. So this business thing actually came pretty easily to me.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It really is that simple. You just name the price and keep doubling it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
yeah,
who's the schmuck who paid $1 million to a 15-year-old? I mean, where did this top out? You built a company eventually out of that?
Yeah, I sort of did. But it was like pretty much by accident.
Yeah.
I never thought I wanted to build a company, and I didn't set out to do that. It was just more or less like, okay, well, this seems like an interesting challenge. So did that. Once the challenge was accomplished, I sort of wanted to do something else. And certain occasions, people wanted me to still help out and do things. So
What inspired Spotify then? What was the challenge there?
Well, the challenge was actually, if you kind of fast forward, I ended up accidentally starting a few of those companies, like a web hosting company following the web design company. At a time, I thought, this company Google sounded pretty cool. This is back in 1998, so I applied for a job there, and they kind of said, hey, come back when you have a college degree. So I said, screw them. I'm going to build a better search engine. Can't be that hard.
Right.
That actually did turn out to be really hard.
Yeah.
And I took a lot of the money I had in this web design thing and tried to pour it into that and lost it all.
Got it. What happened when you started the rocket ship company?
Yeah.
Difficult.
Yes, it is.
But it falls into that same category, which is I think Elon didn't actually know fully exactly how hard the rocket ship company would be.
Right.
Until he started putting them up.
Right. And I think that there's something like if people would know there's something said about that the entrepreneurs that are successful in an industry are seldom the people with the best knowledge about it. It's usually either outsiders or people that have somewhat of an insight, but aren't like full deep into the weeds of why things are working the way they are, because then most people just wouldn't be doing what they're doing.
And it's it can become too daunting because you've heard all the reasons why it wouldn't work. I mean, let's face it, Spotify was not the first online streaming service or online music service.
Right.
I guess Pandora was, and then before that, Rhapsody maybe.
Rhapsody was actually way before.
Way before.
Yeah.
They kind of took a lot of arrows. Coming up the hill.
Yeah.
When did you come up with the idea of Spotify? Was there a specific moment where you said or have the PR people constructed a founder story?
The PR people definitely constructed the founder story by now. But
what's the real story?
Yeah. The truth story is, I came to the point where I ended up selling some companies in the end, almost going into bankruptcy, but then managed to turn things around and then sold the company, ended up, thinking about what I wanted to do with my life. And my co-founder, Martin, actually ended up selling or IPOing his company, which is TradeDoubler, roughly at the same time. So we were sitting in my apartment in the suburb in southern Stockholm, and we were just brainstorming what we wanted to do and what was important to us. And actually, ever since Napster, the first thing, that was what got me into that I knew that I wanted to be working with the internet.
Oh, really? You downloaded Napster and you were like, this thing is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's just phenomenal because, back then, the web was really just text.
Right.
At best, there was some GIF animation of a funny rabbit or something.
Yeah.
But
the blue dot. It bounced around from Razorfish.
Yeah, exactly. But it just wasn't very exciting. And then all of a sudden with Napster, it was really the first service that showed that the internet was for more than just text and images. It was really like a multimedia thing.
Hey everybody, let me stop for a moment and tell you about HostGator. You can stop thinking about the business you want to do and you can just do it. The first step is web hosting and a domain name from our friends at HostGator.com. It's a one-stop shop for your online business. You can set up WordPress, drag and drop builders, easily set up custom email addresses. They have in-house design, SEO, and PPC, pay-per-click services. So as you grow, you'll be able to easily transfer from your $4 a month shared hosting account, and you'll have dedicated services, VPS, all that great stuff, 24/7, 365-day a year live support via chat, phone, or email. We love them so much that TWiST is hosted with them. That's right. It's super affordable compared to things like Amazon. They have reliable service, and we've had a really great experience with them. It's super quick to get set up, and everything is clearly explained and very nice and neat with screenshots and everything. The first 100 TWiST listeners that sign up with the promo code TWIST25 will receive 1 year of HostGator hosting package for just $25. That's right, TWIST25, and you will receive the 1 year of the HostGator Hatchling package for just $25. This includes tons of disk space, unmetered bandwidth, MySQL databases, and multiple custom email accounts. So don't worry, if you're not one of the first 100, you can still save 30% using the promo code TWIST. Thanks again to our friends at HostGator for hosting thisweekinstartups.com and for providing all this great service to our listeners. Go ahead and thank at HostGator on your Twitter handle. Okay, thanks again, HostGator. Let's get back to this amazing program.
So for me, I just realized at that moment, like, holy shit, this is what I want to do. This is going to be the next big thing. And so I came back to that, really thinking about it. If Napster was the first thing that got me into the internet, how is it that music just hasn't been solved? And we started talking about it because it was so obvious that from the consumer endpoint, this is how people wanted to consume music. They wanted to listen to more music than ever before. They wanted to discover new artists, integrated mass. They loved having it, on demand in the sense of, back then it took a few minutes to download the song, but it still felt a lot better than going out driving in your car, going to Tower Records, picking out the stuff. So, it was just a really, really, really fundamentally broken thing, because for the first thing, you had the consumer thing, and the consumer thing was actually working, but it was the business model that ended up being the problem.
Right. It wasn't that people didn't love Napster or Kazaa.
Right.
Or even Travis's first company, Scour.
Yeah,
I mean, it is very interesting when you think about it. Travis did Scour,
Yep.
Red Swoosh, Uber.
Yep.
And then you have Nicholas who did Kazaa.
Yep.
The video service in between, and then Skype. What was the video service in between? It was going to be really big, and it didn't work.
Yeah.
We'll ask him about it
Yeah.
when it comes out.
I forget it.
Nicholas, what was that failure that you had between Skype and Kazaa? It was like the one that got you sued, and then there was the one that failed, and then there was one that was a huge hit.
Yeah.
We'll ask him.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs always appreciate that.
Yeah. Always.
Focus in on the failure.
Always.
So you decide you want to go for Spotify.
Yeah.
And what's next? Did you just build a prototype or an interface, or did you...
Yeah, we started building the product.
Oh, really?
That's always what came first for us. Is just like, and the original vision was like, imagine, we were iTunes users, so imagine having iTunes, but having all the world's music in your music library.
Right.
I was really sort of attached to this emotional sense. What would that do to your behavior if you had all of the world's music on your hard drive? And today we take that thing for granted, but back then, as I said, it took a couple of minutes for you to download just one song. So we needed to create that feeling about, immediacy of no buffering, no nothing. It just needed to be lightning fast so that it felt like you had all the world's music on your hard drive.
And in fact, in that time frame, people talked about the digital jukebox in the sky before the term cloud existed.
Right.
And people said, really the holy grail is this digital jukebox in the sky where you can have anything you want at any time.
Right.
Isn't it amazing it's here now?
Yes, it is amazing. But what's interesting about Sweden is it was here for a long time. Not just because of Spotify, but the truth is we had these broadband connections that enabled us. Actually yesterday I got gigabit fiber pulled into my house.
I hate you.
Yes, thank you. I knew that from before.
On behalf of all Americans.
Yes.
We hate all of you.
Yeah.
For your gigabyte. And also everybody in South Korea we hate as well.
Yes.
And let me guess, you're paying $30 a month for this.
So I am paying
$40.
149 Swedish crowns, which is less than $20 a month.
Nah, I might punch you in the face.
Yeah.
You're paying $20 for a gigabit.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you paying for in Brooklyn? I think you get 3 megabit for $85 from Time Warner.
Yeah.
My entire plan of everything is about $400.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's basically like you pay your rent, then you pay for your internet, and then your car and your kids' tuition.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something like that. So, what was your plan to deal with the licensing? Because you did mention hey, the interface kind of worked.
Yeah.
And that Napster wasn't perfect, but they did kind of get close.
Yeah. Well, so I wasn't very sophisticated in terms of what the plan was to tackle that. So the original plan was I guess it would take about 6 months to get the licensing done.
Seems reasonable.
Yeah,
There's somebody in Hollywood in charge.
Yeah, and sure we'll have to pay some money, but I mean, there are businesses going like this anyway, so I'm sure that they'll just want to get the music out there to as many people as possible, and we'll figure out a way to deal with it later once we get to scale, either through advertising or getting people to pay somehow.
You truly were naive.
Yes.
Hey everybody, let me stop for a moment, this amazing episode, and tell you about the Walker Corporate Law Group. Yes, they are a boutique law firm that specializes in the representation of entrepreneurs and startups. And Scott Walker is the founder of that company, and he is a personal friend of mine, and he does a great job working with startups. I have literally introduced him to dozens, maybe hundreds now, of startups, and they all rave about the services of the Walker Corporate Law Group because their lawyers have decades of experience. You're not going to get junior associates who are getting on-the-job training with your startup. No. They're going to help you with mergers and acquisitions, licensing, terms of service, privacy policies, formation, all this kind of stuff, fundraising, and they're really great at it. And they do fixed fees. They don't want to surprise people with crazy, crazy bills. They think that billable hours can reward inefficiency, so they'll just be fair with you. And that's what I love about them, because if you're a startup, you don't want to get that sticker shock and get a huge, huge bill. Make sure you use the Walker Corporate Law Group, and you can do that by calling Scott Walker at 415-979-9998. 415-979-9998. You can email him, Scott at Walker Corporate Law. walkercorporatelaw.com, or you can visit walkercorporatelaw.com as well. Scott at walkercorporatelaw.com, and let Scott Ed Walker on Twitter know, at Scott Ed Walker, know that you watch the program and you appreciate him supporting independent media like This Week in Startups. One of my oldest advertisers, one of my oldest friends in the industry, just a great guy, a total mensch, and he really takes care of the startups who work with him. Thank you, Scott Walker, for supporting This Week in Startups. Bye-bye.
And I recall, because I was reading up about this myself on the internet, and there's these like collecting societies that claim that they could license this. And I didn't even realize that actually for music there was like multiple parts that you needed to go to. So I read on the internet that, hey, you could get this license, and it was like 5% of your revenue for doing what we were doing. And I'm
Sounds
like,
reasonable.
yeah, this seems really
Maybe
reasonable.
it's mechanical license or something. Or
Performing rights. But I thought that was the whole thing. So I'm like, shit, this will take 6 months. This is going to be super easy.
Plug and play.
Yeah. And then I got introduced to someone who was in the music industry, and I kind of said, well, maybe you can help us just get this done. And I guess it will take just a few months, and then it will be
Who was this? Like some American or?
Yeah, Fred Davis.
Fred Davis. Yeah, sure. Fred Wilson.
Yep.
New Yorker, yeah.
Yeah. So Fred just said, well, I need to sit you down. And I'm like, yeah, sure. It's like, well, it's not really going to be as easy as you think, because you actually need to go and do deals with people individually. But I'll introduce you to them. And I'm like, okay, fine. That's totally fair. So I got on a plane to New York, sat down with all the major labels and some of the bigger indies. And everyone was super supportive. Yeah, this seems really interesting. Seems really great. If you can come back in a few weeks, we'll try to figure something out. So I remember walking out, calling my co-founder Martin, and sort of saying, well, this seems totally reasonable. We'll do it in about 6 months. And about 2.5 years later, we launched.
And what was the nature of those negotiations? I mean, because now the music industry seems to have a hate, love relationship with you guys. They seem to love you most of the time. Once in a while, there's a flare-up. At that time, did they look at you as just like a bunch of dumb kids from Stockholm they could take money from? Like just get some big advance payment from? Or did they actually think that this would become a transformative company like it has?
Yeah, you should have asked the guy that was on the stage earlier. I think Per, who was from one of the labels, that question. I don't know, to be honest. I think one of the things that we did that was amazing was we were really, really adamant about people trying our product. So during this process, the 2.5 years, like we did all sorts of things to get them to use it. And in the cases where they didn't want to use it, we managed to figure out ways where their kids went to school and infiltrated their schools so that everyone in the school was using the product. Because, that's, by the way, a great marketing tactic if you want to reach parents, is go through their kids. We just got everyone around them to start using this, and eventually started building a peer pressure about this product is truly amazing. So I think half of it was, hey, we'll get some money. This probably will never fly, but it didn't matter because we got some money. And the other half was a real belief, like, holy shit, this may actually work. The rest of
What was the investor reaction to it in the early days? Before you launched, who was the first investor or the first group of investors? What was the first valuation? How much did you raise back in 2007, 2008? Yeah, so we were a little bit of an odd duck in the sense that we bootstrapped this ourselves, and we had money from before, so we ended up investing almost $10 million of our own money. Oh, wow. That's a good sign when you're an investor and you see the founders have put that much money to work. Yeah, so we were both like serial entrepreneurs, which back at the time, there weren't too many serial entrepreneurs in the Swedish ecosystem that had a couple of successes or had enough money to invest in your own thing. We never obviously thought that we'd have to invest as much money as we ended up having to do, kind of similar to the Elon example in the end. Yeah, well, Elon went broke.
Yes.
He literally went to negative.
Yeah. We didn't go that far, but
In fact, he was living on a loan, according to what he said publicly.
did you lend him the money or?
I actually offered to.
Oh, really? That
Yeah.
could have been an interesting one.
I was at dinner with him and he was broke, and I said I could loan you
Yeah.
$1 million or $2 million. I don't have that much money, but I could
Yeah.
loan you a couple of million.
Yeah.
He said, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I've got a loan for a couple of hundred, whatever. He had a loan from somebody very famous, I think, and he's talked about it publicly. But
All right.
he went through $300 million to get SpaceX and Tesla there.
Yeah.
I said, what happened to the $300 million?
Yeah.
And he said, you see the 2 rockets that blew up? I said,
Yeah.
yeah. He goes, that's
that.
a big portion of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were you broke at the time, or did you still have a little bit left? How close did you get to the wire?
We were not in that position, and we didn't blow up 300 million. Not that we had 300 million to
blow
start
up,
with,
but yeah.
But
Were you nervous that this wasn't going to work and you had blown so much money of your own?
no, I wasn't. Again, I'd never really been motivated by money. That's
Right.
not why I started stuff. So I didn't care too much about that. I cared a lot about our employees, because at the time, as we were building the product, as you do, like you find other great engineers or product people or people you want to bring on board in your company. And so by the time, when we started doing the licensing, actually trying to get finalized, and we were about 40, 50 people working.
That's a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah. So
It's a lot of weight, isn't it, as an entrepreneur, to know that they all came to work on your vision?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
It's a lot of responsibility.
That was, to be honest, the toughest thing, like for us, all throughout. Just there was so much belief. Everyone knew this was the product, and I kind of made the mistake. I mean, we got incredibly lucky that everything got sorted out, but I did a mistake which I wouldn't do today again, which was I kind of shielded everyone from the whole licensing thing. And I think there was a pro and a con with that. The pro with it was that there was so many back and forths, like that, I started having hair, and then in the end of the process, I didn't have any hair. So I hate to burden someone else with that.
Yeah.
But the downside was, if things would have gone south, people, had no idea that we were even.
Yeah, they could have felt
close.
betrayed that you didn't tell them.
Yeah, totally.
This is one of the most challenging things as an entrepreneur, is that almost every company is on the verge of crashing and burning, even the big ones.
Yeah.
Because our industry moves so quick and so violently.
Yeah.
And if you're totally transparent, which you want to be,
Yeah.
you can make everybody, just not be able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
And that's unfair too.
Yeah.
It's a hard decision to make.
Yeah, you got to find the right balance. But I clearly erred on the side of not being very transparent.
You let them also work, right? You let them do the work.
Yeah. But in hindsight, I realized that I got incredibly lucky because things turned out okay. So the things I had said for 2 years ended up happening. But I felt for a while that I was kind of repeating the same thing. Yeah, we'll figure out the licensing soon. It's obviously we kept pushing the timeline.
There was a reputation at one point in time that Spotify was like not going to work because of the licensing.
Mm-hmm.
How close was it, in your estimation, percentage-wise, to working, like at its worst, like to not working? At the darkest day, what did you think your chances were?
The darkest days, we had a series of meeting in New York. It was about a week where it was pretty evident, like everyone just said, no, this isn't going to happen. Like, and don't come back. That was essentially.
Really?
Yeah. So I called Martin up and I'm like, hey, what's going on? And for those that don't know Martin, I will say that he's, the guy just, it doesn't bother him at all. Like none of that does. So he's just going to be, okay, well, that's totally fine. Let's go and do something else. So for him, he just listened to what I said and it's like, okay, well, that sounds stupid. But if that's the case, let's go and do something else. Give it another couple of weeks and then we'll figure it out. And that was incredibly reassuring for me because, I just felt like we had both invested so much of our time, money, had all these employees, and he was just totally unfazed by the situation.
What happened in those 3 or 4 weeks that made it turn around?
That's a very good question that I still wonder sometimes. what I ended up doing is I just canceled my trip back home to Stockholm.
You ripped up the return ticket.
Yeah, and ended up camping out in front of their offices. Coming back, I had to tweak my messaging a little bit and twist things around, pay them a little bit more money, figure things around. But it just really turned. And then the other thing that I did, which really saved the company, was we wanted to launch worldwide day one. And I said, okay, screw it. Let's not do the US. Let's start in a territory where this doesn't matter as much to you. And let me prove the model.
That was brilliant. That took the pressure off.
Yeah. And then everything turned around. And
that was great because I had acquired an account. And I had a VPN, and I'm a big Bob Dylan fan. And I had no idea that so many French people loved Bob Dylan enough to cover every song. And holy fuck, the French can do Dylan.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever heard this. And then I bought the US Spotify, and I couldn't get the French Dylan anymore.
Can you get it now?
No comment.
Yeah.
I don't know who's in the audience here. I'm aware cameras here and stuff like that. I mean, can I? Tell me.
But on the US account, can you get the French?
I don't know. Can I?
You should be.
You should be able to get all of it? I thought some of it wasn't allowed.
No, I think...
Is it all global now? Like all the global stuff can go anywhere?
It's not all global, but it has really changed. So most of the time, one of the really cool things now about Spotify is that when we launched in Hong Kong, for instance, we saw a spike on the West Coast in the US because there's large Canto population.
Sure.
So that sort of happened. When we launched Turkey, Germany started spiking.
Fascinating.
And
all the expats get on the service.
Yeah. But for the local labels, it's even more interesting because in many cases, they're just focusing on their own home market. So we're opening up an additional revenue stream for them in all the other markets where they, honestly didn't even think that there was an audience.
Yeah. And so today, 20 million members? How many is it now? 15, 20?
20 million paid subscribers.
And you release your numbers almost like you're a public company, I noticed. Like you put out quarterly numbers. What's the thinking there?
It sort of ends up happening anyway. So because
the numbers leak, you mean, or
no, it's not that it leaks. So one of the things that we do is we try to build as much transparency as we can in the platform. So all of our partners, labels, and artists that try to upload their stuff, we want to show them, the numbers, the number of streams, the number of users, the amount of revenue that we're paying out. So we might just as well share that to everyone. So for about a year and a half, or actually for about 2 years, we've kind of run this as a public company. And, I do quarterly earnings reports with my investors, just talking through what happened in the quarter and so on and so forth. So it just ended up making things a lot easier for us.
And everybody pays about $10 a month, $8 a month. What is it average?
In the Western world, it's around $10 a month. But if you're in some developing market, then the fee's actually lower.
Got it. So just back of the envelope, a couple of $100 million a month in revenue, a couple of $1 billion a year in revenue.
Yeah, ballpark.
I mean, those numbers released or no?
They're not released. What we have said is we've paid out more than $3 billion in total, where we're
and you get
fine.
20-30% of the overall revenue?
Yeah, we pay out 70%, we keep 30% ourselves.
And how often do you have to renegotiate that percentage? And does that make you not sleep at night, knowing every 5 years or every whatever number of years you got to go back to New York and beg and plead, or do you not at this point?
I think it's a very different discussion at this point. Now it's really not a point whether streaming is a business that they want to be in. They know it's the business that they want to be in, and they want to transition as much as possible to that business.
They do want to transition to it.
Yeah. Because it's in many cases it's a much easier business, and instead of having to count on you paying for an album once a year, it's the annuity of it, and there's a fixed income. It's easy for them to calculate on. They know how much they can invest in supporting new artists.
It's a much more predictable business.
Yeah. So for them, it's actually it has tons of benefits.
it seems like it's the dream business for them. Have they realized that yet?
Oh yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, if you look at this market as an example, 70+% of all revenues, physical, digital, etc., is streaming. It's really remarkable. So when you think about what that has meant for this business, it's really at an all-time high in terms of signing new artists, in terms of health of the ecosystem of labels and artists and so on. And
how has it changed how music is made? Because we did have this phenomenon of people wanted to work really hard to make an album.
Yeah.
And an album, had a cover and liner notes and some of them, had a theme, right? And some of them were double albums.
Yeah.
And they were released on a certain schedule and a lot of marketing went into them.
Yeah.
How has it changed now on an artistic level? Has it changed? And are the labels embracing that?
I would say it is changing. It's not obvious yet if there's like one de facto way it has changed. I think it differs for different artists. But I think the most obvious thing that has changed, as I said, is the release windows. You used to be able to do a campaign in the US and then maybe 6 months later take the artist to Europe and try to figure it out. It's much more compressed now. So you release it everywhere and then you do a short promotional stunt where you travel around the world like crazy for 2 months and try to do as much promotion as
exhausting,
you can. Yeah. That's why I asked about the sort of French Dylan ones, because that should be a good opportunity for the French artists. So it's a lot more of a global business. But then also you have the rise of EDM, where those guys are just releasing so many more tracks, and they don't think about it as albums. It's really just track by track by track. That seems to be successful for them. That said, we still have enormous amount of people listen to full-length albums, which I'm in particular proud of, because if you think about it from an economic standpoint, like what the iTunes model used to do was that you sort of cherry-picked your favorites. But if the additional cost to listen to an entire album is zero, then a lot more people are, willing to listen and kind of discover the whole thing instead of
there'll be more risk-taking.
So, yeah.
And do you find in the data that people are more eclectic in their musical taste because they have access to everything, as opposed to, hey, when we grew up in the 80s and the 90s, you picked your genre. You were either into goth or pop or whatever, rock or heavy metal, and you bought the albums in that and you were loyal to that and you dressed like that.
Yeah.
It seems like this generation is listening to hip hop and folk and, everybody, and they all seem to have a very diverse taste. Is that because of streaming, you think?
It's not because of streaming, but I will say this. I think people are now listening to more music now than ever before from a bigger diversity of artists. And it changes the business model, dramatically, because all of a sudden you used to sell scarcity, now you're selling utility. So it's a totally different business model, and it means some artists will do better, and it means some artists will do worse in this new economy. But for culture and for humanity, I think it's tremendous. I think it's amazing that we have people now listening to more music than before and from a bigger diversity of artists.
What do you think of services like DistroKid, Phil Kaplan's company, that allow people to, amateurs, pay a flat fee for a year to publish unlimited into the ecosystem? That seems to be like the input has been opened, where it used to be a very narrow window. You had to pay $20 or $200 to put a CD on iTunes. Now you can pay $30 a year, I think, on DistroKid. And publish like crazy.
Well, that's the thing too. I mean, if you think about the barrier, if you were an artist before, so for you to even record your album, and you wanted a string orchestra, we would be talking hundreds of thousands of dollars in just recording fees, with all the sound engineers, the actual orchestra coming in, and so on. That was the first thing. Now, if you wanted to get distributed in a lot of stores, then we were talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars more. And then you needed promotion. So all of a sudden, you needed to go to all the radio stations, and unless you had leverage, there was no way the radio station would play your stuff. So again, either you had to pay them, which eventually became illegal, or you ended up getting signed to someone. So the truth is that there were a lot of gatekeepers in the old model. Today, there are no gatekeepers. Like, anyone can self-publish, be on any platform for virtually no fee whatsoever. And the irony now is, like, you'd think that should lead to more people discovering you, but since there's more choices out there too, discovery is also, in many ends, much harder.
Right.
But at least there's like no one telling you that, hey, you can't do this, or your music, I don't think it's good enough, so therefore you can't record it. You can record your stuff, and if you're truly an amazing artist, people will discover it. We should make the discovery thing a lot more efficient, so that more gets the chance to be discovered, but I would still say that it's a totally different mindset from 20 years ago.
And Taylor Swift recently was like, I don't want my album on the streaming services. I want to sell albums. And that seems logical to me. I mean, if you want to sell albums, having it only available. Did she make the right decision for her, since she wanted to sell complete albums, to do it that way, do you think? I mean, I know it's the wrong decision for Spotify, and philosophically it's not right for you, but was that the right decision for her?
I don't know, to be honest. So I think the fallacy with that argument is, I mean, she's doing tremendously fine anyway. So we're talking really about the margins here of doing 10%, 20% better. Yeah. But what I would say is, like, the argument was sort of, hey, you withheld it from this so that you can benefit from all this. The truth is, though, she didn't. I mean, the stuff was on YouTube. It was on all other digital platforms that don't respect.
Why do people do the YouTube like that? I mean, are they getting paid some amazing number? That Vivo service seems to have YouTube over a barrel.
No, it's because they want to get promoted. So they view it more as promotion than anything else. But what we saw very clearly is, like, the people who were listening to Taylor Swift, you could see an immediate spike, the next day from when we removed our catalog to YouTube streams. It was almost a one-to-one correlation.
Because kids are smart.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't take them 50 minutes to get the album. It takes them 3 seconds. Anyway.
I noticed a lot of kids will make playlists on YouTube, and they'll use YouTube as their Spotify, essentially, and put an ad blocker on or ad remover. Yeah. What do you think of that as a competitor? Is that your big competitor these days? People go into YouTube?
Yeah, I mean, YouTube is the largest music service in the world. But there's the legal side of YouTube, then there's what people do with YouTube. So one of the largest things that people do is stream ripping. If you look in the app stores, both the Apple and Google app stores, you see in the top 10 apps, almost exclusively, always, there's some sort of stream ripper where you can download the stuff off of YouTube or SoundCloud or any of those platforms and put it in your local library. And so it's obviously a huge thing. And the way for us to compete with that is just making our service better and better.
And it seems like Google would be able to police that better. They don't seem to police it all that much. In the Chrome store, I know for video downloads, you can get a video downloader ripper all the time. They don't seem to take them out of there. And on Android, they don't seem to police them there. What is your theory about why the smartest company in the internet space with the most intelligent employees can't police a store? It doesn't make sense that a bunch of Mensa people over at Google can't take these things down.
Yeah, I think they have fundamentally different approaches, Apple and Google. So Apple starts with closed, and then on a case-by-case basis, they will open it up. Google has the opposite view, which is we start with open, and on a case-by-case basis, we'll close things down. But I think that's the ethos that really is the huge difference between those two companies. So Google's approach to this is if someone tells us it's illegal, i.e. a government of some sort, we will take it down. But until that moment, it's not our role to police the platform. We want to have as many things out there to support as much innovation as possible. So I just think it's, I don't think it's malice. I just think it is how their platform works. And they take a very similar approach in search, as you know, as well.
Yeah.
So it's really just consistently across the Google ecosystem that they do that, where Apple do consistently the other way around.
Let's talk about competitors. Every year, the Spotify killer is launched, and every year you add millions of more subscribers. The latest Spotify killer, of course, iTunes Music. I tried to use it. I couldn't find it inside of iTunes. Everybody uniformly hates the iTunes app. How much did you guys laugh and high-five when you saw that product?
Yeah.
I mean, it was kind of comical. I mean,
yeah. Well,
I mean, they didn't even release their own app.
I made a tweet that I later had to remove, so I'm not going to say much more about that.
Which was like, wow, this is terrible.
Something.
It's kind of shocking, isn't it, how bad it was? It wasn't very good. I do say I like the Beats One radio station. I like the content on that a lot.
Yeah.
But it's a fundamental mistake for them to. What do you think the fundamental mistakes were?
So look, I don't want to talk about what their mistakes was or isn't. I will say this. I think both Apple and Google are serious in music and will keep on investing in trying to make it. We had this discussion before. We're specialized. We don't do anything other than our own service. Apple and Google does this and about 10,000 other things.
Yeah.
I think there's something huge in terms of that focus, because it brings clarity. It brings, this is all I do every day. I don't even invest in other companies. I just focus on building this company. And we think by that focus and the thousands, if not millions of hours that we produce in just creating that experience, we will win. But do we expect to be alone in a space like music, where there's 1 billion plus people around the world that listen to it pretty much on an everyday basis? No, of course not. And obviously the biggest companies in the world is interested in the most accessible art form in the world.
But you have to stay paranoid, because Apple is not happy about how music turned out. And they are going to come back and they're going to get it right at some point.
Yeah, I think they're going to keep investing, as I said, and trying to make their product better. It makes sense. They have a deep heritage in music, which they obviously care about. I think on my end, though, as I said, we have our entire company. The way you win in this fast-moving world, where honestly it's moving faster and faster by the day, and there's so much innovation around the world, the only way you can win is by being, super focused on solving one problem better than anyone else, and by moving faster than everyone else in solving that problem. It's really simple if you think about it like that. And I like to think that it doesn't matter how many smart Mensa people you have in your company, sooner or later you're gonna get defocused if you do 1,000 things, and you can't do all 1,000 things super well.
So let's talk about you adding features and verticals. Business is starting to look an awful like an HBO in terms of the profile, right? You have 20 million subs. They have 30 million paid, I think. And now you've added podcasting, and you guys are doing a lot in that area. I know This Week in Startups, my podcast is now going to be featured in that. We signed some paperwork just yesterday.
Yep, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, the paperwork was good.
It wasn't such a bad negotiation this time around, no?
No, I always say no to almost everybody with these things, because what happens is they sell into our advertisers, and that just creates confusion. With yours, it was like, we're not doing that, so don't worry about it for now. So if we're kicking it down the road, that's fine. But talk to me about podcasting and why that's a focus, because you seem like you want to stay extremely focused. You just gave the big lecture on, hey, focus wins. well, podcasting is not music, so now you're defocusing yourself, or are you? It's an adjacency, clearly.
Yeah.
So why podcasting, and how much effort are you putting into it?
Yeah. So the way we're thinking about this is really through the lens of music. And one of the things that we discovered is when you look at, the fundamental thing that we ask ourselves at Spotify is like, how can we bring music into every moment of someone's life? Because our view is really, I can't think of a single moment which wouldn't be better if we had music to it, which is why, we have music here, and so on. So, with that lens, like we keep looking at the things that people are doing today, where music is a huge part. One of those things is people commuting, whether it's by being in the car, like the average American spends like an hour and a half in the car every day, if not more. The average European commutes for 30 minutes plus on a bus or subway or whatever it is.
Bicycle.
So there's a lot of time there, which today people are doing, listening to music that honestly Spotify hasn't been a big part of. And it struck us as surprising because in the beginning in the car, we thought, well, it's because our car integrations aren't that big. And, we need to be on the dashboards, and when the internet connectivity in the car will be there, so eventually we'll be there. But then we actually started, like one of our engineers doing a hack week decided that it was an interesting thing to kind of figure out how many people were already today using Spotify in the car. So he figured that Bluetooth was a great proxy for this, and looked at sort of if he could find car models. And it turns out that we had more than tens of millions of users already connected to Spotify in the car. So we're like, shit, this is really big. But when you looked at the times when people were commuting, we didn't actually see all that usage. So then we asked people, well, you've clearly connected Spotify here, but you don't seem to be using it much. Don't you like the service? And it's like, yeah, the service is fantastic. Okay, but what are you doing instead? Well, I'm listening to the radio. Okay, why do you prefer the radio? Well, because, as much as I like music, I also want to know what the weather forecast is. I want to know the traffic report, and I want to hear the news.
News, politics, opinion.
So all of the things here that we were talking about. So all of a sudden it kind of struck us, in order to do music in that moment, we also needed to do more. So for us, the benefit of us is we're not a broadcast station, i.e., this is the time slot that we have to send the same thing to everyone in the world. But we have this platform that enables people to customize their experience. So if I'm into tech, I may want to listen to your podcast, whereas someone else may want to listen to BBC News instead. So for us, it's really this opportunity that we think that we're actually going to get people to listen to more music by also enabling this.
And what will the deal be with podcasters ultimately? You think you'll start putting ads in between and splitting revenue, get a little bit of a check from you, or you're just going to outright pay us by stream like you do with music companies? What's your vision there?
I don't know what the ultimate business model will be. What I will say is that
$1 a play sounds good to me.
Sounds good. Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, what I will say though is like what strikes me is that there's a huge amount of distribution in podcasting. We were talking about that, hundreds of thousands of people listening to just your show, and then if you think about all the others, there's millions and millions.
Adam Carolla and Mark Maron get over 1 million, and it's pretty amazing.
But in order for any platform to be successful, you got to solve a couple of things. You got to solve distribution, you got to solve monetization, you got to solve for a way for people to figure out how to handle it with your customers. And one of the things that we think we can help with is the monetization aspect for podcasters. If that means that we will let you sell advertising yourself, but sell it on our platform, which brings you a bunch of other tools, or if it means that, hey, we have a subscriber base here and we can pay you because of that, all of that will hopefully enable you to bring a different level of monetization, which in turn will hopefully mean that you can invest more in creating a better experience.
Hey, so let's talk about another Spotify killer. Jay-Z, the most powerful recording artist alive, I guess tied with Taylor Swift. So Taylor Swift pulled her catalog, a little bit of a big deal for you, but you seem to have smoothed that over. And then Jay-Z in the same year says, you know what? We are going to declare our independence, and we are going to have a press release with everybody. Madonna's going to put her leg on a table. And I don't know what that was about exactly. It was kind of like your aunt, like doing it at Thanksgiving or something. It was like, oh, our crazy aunt put her leg on the table and signed a document. What's going on? But when you saw that press conference, did you laugh more or less than when you saw the Apple product? Because it was pretty insane. A bunch of artists saying they were going to declare independence by charging everybody twice as much as Spotify. That, I mean, I don't know what the independence they were declaring was exactly.
Well, I think again, I think we live in a world where we're in this huge transition from this business where everyone knew what it was. You know, you knew that if you sold X units, that would equate to X or Y. So it was very clear what everyone had to do. And all of a sudden, like, you know, I have people coming up to me and saying, well, I got 1 million plays here. That's huge. So I ought to be given $1 million, like the dollar a play thing.
Yeah, exactly.
But they don't realize that every day on Spotify, they're generating billions of plays. And so the currency is different. Totally different. And the behavior is totally different too. So it's just a lot of confusion in the marketplace of what that means. You know, and there's this fear of, hey, there's no transparency. Like, I don't know what I'm getting in the end. You know, someone ripping me off and so on, which creates this uncertainty in the artist community. But I would say it's very natural, and it's something that happens when you see huge changes. I mean, it's certainly happening in Uber and like Airbnb and all of these places as well, that the ecosystem is just going through this massive transition.
But it's been a complete failure, Tidal. Why is it a complete failure? Because people won't pay for high-bit songs?
No, I mean, I think that
it's a bad product?
No, it's a totally okay product. I think failure.
So it's completely okay.
Yes, it's completely okay. No, but I think this is the way I think about it. The truth is that very, very few music services, like we talked about, have gotten to scale and material traction. It's really, really hard. So coming in quite late into the game with a product that's okay but not fantastic, it's not going to cut it. And I think what the tech world has shown time and time again is if you're coming into the market leveraging distribution or some other mechanics, that's not the hard thing to solve for. What you need to solve for as an entrepreneur is you need to make your product 10 times better than number 2. Then you've got a real chance. Anything else, and you're likely not going to get very successful at all.
Now, what about high bit rate music? I mean, I downloaded some FLACs to see what I was missing. I got a nice speaker system for my thing. I could tell the difference. I was like, hey, this FLAC stuff sounds pretty good. Do you think the average consumer cares? Do you think we're going to live at a certain point in time, given your gigabit at home for $6 a month and unlimited storage in the cloud? Are we going to actually be listening to gorgeous, beautiful, rich, huge, 500 meg songs at some point, or gig songs?
I like to think so. Like, I'm an audiophile myself, so I certainly like to think so. But I think it's like very similar to what happened with Blu-ray or even like HD TV versus not. It starts out as this premium offering. It starts out super expensive. It's like a very, very small niche population that gets it. Then it gets priced at like 20% more. Then it starts getting the masses, and then eventually it just gets priced the same as the old technology before. And that's when you get the mass adoption.
How soon are we out from that? 5 years, you think? 10 years?
Well, it's certainly not, because it's technically not possible to do this today. So I think the largest problem is just that I would like for us to take one step further than just lossless, which is the same CD file. I would like to see if there's a way for us to go back to the original masters and recode them and
which is what Neil Young is doing with Pono, which is amazing. He wants to have 50 plus track songs. That would be a gig each or something. I mean, he played them for me in his car, and it was amazing.
Yep.
You can tell the difference.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool experience, by the way. One of my great ones.
He drove you around in the car?
He picked me up at the airport and drove me around in his car, and we were listening to music. That was
he drove me around his ranch, and I was like, I'm in a car with Neil Young.
Yeah.
And he's playing me music. That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
My life is pretty good right now.
Yeah, that's exactly how I felt too.
Right? You're just like, wow, this is surreal.
Yeah.
Well, listen, continued success with it. Thank you for being so open and honest and telling your story here. And congratulations on, all of our friends have failed at this, and you've succeeded. And I think for that, I think we all admire, your wherewithal and your partner's wherewithal, and making a product that we all just love. I know everybody here loves the product. So big round of applause for Daniel, please.
Thank you, guys.